All right. So this week, HBO Max, they're doing that thing where they're putting movies that would have been theatrically released on HBO Max, and the latest movie is The Little Things. Let me see here. The official movie synopsis reads thusly: Deputy Sheriff Joe Deacon joins forces with Sergeant Jim Baxter to search for a serial killer who's terrorizing Los Angeles. As they track the culprit, Baxter is unaware that the investigation is dredging up echoes of Deke's past, uncovering disturbing secrets that could threaten more than his case. The movie was written and directed by John Lee Hancock. It stars Denzel Washington, Rami Malek, and Jared Leto. So first we'll do our spoiler free impression. So I'll just say I found this movie to be very disappointing. I would describe this movie as the cinematic equivalent of Blue Balls because I feel like they set something up, and they just never deliver. And I kind we'll talk about it. I kind of feel like I know what they were going for, but it was so unsatisfying that I can't really recommend this movie. What do you guys think? Spoiler free.
I thought it was so boring, and it just didn't deliver. Like you said, there was nothing there.
I thought it was okay, but also like at the same time, there were elements that I thought were fairly predictable, even though they were trying to do something like original. So I don't know.
Just kind of blah for you. Well, okay, let's get into the spoiler. So basically, plot wise, Denzel Washington, he plays this former Los Angeles homicide detective.
Right, he's still like a country cop.
Yeah, he now works just as like a regular cop in some shithole town north of L.A. And one day his boss is like, "Hey, we got some evidence down in your old stomping grounds of Los Angeles. We need you to go pick it up for us." And he's like, "Okay." So he goes down there. There's a mix-up with evidence where he's not going to be able to get it until the next day. So he's like, oh, "Okay, I'll spend the night here." And he kind of interacts with some of the old people he worked with. And at the same time, he finds out that there's an open case that's garnered a lot of public attention. That's a serial killer case, and Rami Malek plays like the lead detective on the case. It just so happens that night they find another body related to the case. So Rami Malek's like, "Hey, you're a famous detective. Why don't you come help us? Look at the scene." So he goes to the scene, and basically, this case reminds him of some bodies that were found when he was a detective in LA. And so, like, he thinks, it might be the same killer. So, basically, Denzel cashes in some of his paid time off days, and he stays in LA to see if he can solve the case or whatever. So eventually he tracks down the prime suspect of the case, which is Jared Leto. And he's definitely like a strange dude. But he seems to know a lot about the murder cases, even things that were never released to the public. But basically later on, Denzel breaks into the guy's apartment, and he finds all this stuff that, basically this guy just seems like he's like an obsessed guy. He's always got the cop scanner on, and he's following, like, he's got all the newsprint cutouts of these cases and stuff. And so you don't really know if this guy is the killer, well, to begin with, or if he's just like this like weirdo who's like obsessed with the case.
Yeah, so yeah, basically he's like a crime buff. And there's also like an incident where he'd confessed to a murder before that he was not guilty of.
Yeah. So basically what happens is we find out that Denzel, back in the day when he was on one of those cases, he accidentally shot an innocent woman, killed, and she died. And basically, his friend who worked for the department helped him cover it up.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is Jared Leto, Denzel and Rami Malek are basically following Jared Leto around, and they're parked outside his house, and Denzel eventually goes to get coffee, and like we assume that Jared Leto's like knows that they're following him, he's watching them, and so since he knows Rami Malek's alone, he goes and he's like, they never found the very last like woman that went missing that they think was caught by the serial killer, and so like he's like, okay, come with me, and I'll show you where she's buried. So they go, and like Denzel was just coming back as they left, so he like gets in the car and he's trying to follow them, but he's a bit away, ways from them, and so basically Jared Leto drives Rami Malek out to this place and gives him a shovel, and he's like, oh, she's buried right there, and he digs up and there's nothing there, and he's like, oh, you know what, over there, and like the whole time he's like basically taunting Rami Malek, and eventually pisses him off, and Rami Malek hits him in the face with the shovel, and it kills him. And that's when Denzel pulls up. And so then what happens is Denzel basically aids Rami Malek in covering up the case. And then once he does that, like... There was a bit before where we found out like the woman that was missing, she always had this red beret in her hair.
Yeah, they really shoehorned that in.
Yeah, they want you to know that. And so basically Denzel, he goes back to... Now this was one thing I was unclear on. So as Rami Malek is supposed to be burying the body, he goes to Jared Leto's apartment and he basically bags up a bunch of shit. And is the stuff he bags up like things that he thinks could lead the police to thinking he's not the killer? Is that why he took all that stuff?
I think he just wanted to make it look like he'd packed up and left.
Oh, okay.
I think he pretty much packed up everything.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe that's what it was. So he does that, and then Rami Malek gets this package from Denzel that has the red beret in it. It's basically... telling Rami Malek that, hey, this guy was the killer, But then, very end of the movie, how it ends is Denzel's back home. He's burning all this stuff that he bagged up. And then the very last thing he does is he throws away a thing of beret. So he bought the beret. And basically, there was a part also, I should have set this up, where, like, he could tell that Rami Malek was much like him and was like obsessed with finding the killer, and he basically wanted to make sure that Rami Malek didn't have the guilt that he has over accidentally killing the woman that he killed. That's how I read it anyway.
Yeah.
So that's why he gave him this beret and made him think that, hey, you killed the guy, but he was the killer. And that's how. And then fade to black. That's how the movie ends. This is my main problem with the movie, is you don't... Like, I'm fine with him, like, that part of it, but the fact that they never gave us the killer, I hate, because you don't set up a murder mystery and then not give us a murderer.
Well, I mean, I think that was kind of the whole point, but again, like, he gave the guy the beret, but, like... Next week, when somebody else goes missing, he's gonna be like, "Oh, this is horseshit."
And that's the other thing. This is what they could have done to save this movie: is Denzel figures out who the killer actually was, and then we get the scene of Denzel, killing the real killer, but Rami Malek is none the wiser.
Possibly another ending. I think they almost had to have considered, and I think it would have been stronger if they would have done this. Is to not tell us whether that one guy out in the desert was actually the killer or not, and not show us burning the beret. So you're like, did he do it? Did he fake it or not? Because he was in the position to do it. Like I predicted, the beret thing before the end. And I think just leaving it as a mystery would have been a little bit stronger.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I was confused by the plan of Jared Leto. Like, he was like, all right, let's just drive out there in the middle of nowhere. I'll
So
piss you
he's
off.
basically, he's getting a hard on just like fucking with them. Like it's just fun for him. And he's like, he's a creep and he's into it, but he's probably not the killer.
That's another thing they alluded to is like this is kind of a sexual thing for him. Because there's that part where they're actually interrogating him and like Denzel notices that he's got like a huge boner or something. He's like, you're harder than Chinese arithmetic.
That's terrible.
That's one of Jim Cornette's lines.
So who was that guy who killed himself? Where they interrogated him and he called during the interview and he was like asking about this girl and.
Oh right, they had like a suspect because he was in the area and he'd been.
He was a peeping Tom.
Yeah, he was like a peeping Tom or a stalker or something, but he wasn't the one, or they didn't think he was the one.
Right.
But
So
like,
yeah, I don't
he
know if he just like lost it after they interrogated him and killed himself or what exactly. But yeah, he was like a peeping Tom in the area. And that's why they brought him in.
Yeah, they kind of showed him, didn't really expand upon like what
Yeah,
his
I
whole
didn't,
thing was.
didn't even think about it. Maybe he was the killer.
I don't know why, but for a while I thought they were gonna set up the like the bald cop with the mustache. I thought they were gonna set him up as the killer. I don't know why.
Well, in the very beginning, I was wondering if it was like the one detective, but I mean, it proved out pretty quickly that he wasn't. But he just was kind of being weird and an asshole. And
The other thing that could have saved this movie a little bit too is, I mean, it's called The Little Things. And so I think it would have been cool if they would have laid out these clues to where, like, if you paid attention, you could actually decipher who the killer was. But I don't believe that to be the case.
yeah, you don't usually see that. But there was one point, like, where he was like, she always wore a red beret. Mr. Thompson. It was like hint, hint. And you're like, oh, this is going to be important later, I guess. But it was like a completely random fact that didn't make any sense that he would be talking about it.
Yeah, and I didn't really think about it at the time, but you're exactly right. The fact that the killer's still out there, presumably he's just going to kill again, and then Rami Malek's going to be like, oh, the beret was bullshit anyway. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if they would have just added one more scene on where, Denzel figured out who the killer was and killed the killer, like, then I would be like, this was a decent movie. And like the thing of it is like I actually thought like the first 2/3 of the movie were fine, but then like I can't recommend people going through that because it's just going to end so unsatisfying.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like the first 1/3 of the movie was really hard for me to watch just because it was so slow. And you know how suspense movies start out, they lay out everything.
Right.
And so, yeah, I had to turn it off after like 30 minutes and just do something else and then try to get back into it.
All right. Any final thoughts about the movie, you guys?
Not really.
No, it
What are we
sucked.
watching next week?
Well, first, what would you guys give the 0 out of 10? I like to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Like 3 out of 10.
I don't know, 5 or 6. I was in the middle of the road.
Yeah, I'm gonna go like a 4. It wasn't like the acting was fine. I think they did fine with what they were given. It's just at the end of the day.
Yeah, really, they're all good actors.
Yeah, at the end of the day, though, it just was so unsatisfying the way it ended. Yeah, I don't know what would be a good thing to watch for next week. We might have to figure it out off.
I don't know. Now that we have Disney, I'm looking for the second chapter of Mandalorian.
Yeah. I'm gonna. I haven't watched.
I'm gonna say I don't think I can watch it all in a week. But
that's the thing. Is like it gets harder when you want to review television because it's a little more of a time commitment. But maybe we can find a movie on there to watch too. We'll find something.
Yeah.
Or even better, people out there we hope are watching.
Revenge of the Nerds 2.
You could follow us on Twitter. Where could they do that?
A name for this too, and that's the number 2.
at unsolicited SUG.
And at Zach Jones Live, ZachJonesLive, and you could actually tell us what movie you'd like us to review, and we could do that for you. Or, even easier, if you're watching this on YouTube, just go into the old YouTube comments and leave us a comment right there and let us know.